arguing about a cat. This was late morning. It was sometime around the year 830. It was a cold winter. There was snow on the ground. The monks had all been cooped up inside and they didn't have much to do. They gathered in the kitchen, the warmest place in the monastery, and their boredom and isolation just boiled over into some stupid argument about a cat. The abbot, who went by Master Nansen, he heard them and he stormed in and he grabbed the cat. He picked up a big cleaver from the kitchen counter and he said, "If somebody can say a word of Zen, I won't kill it." All the monks froze. He looked around. There wasn't a word. He pinned the cat to the counter and chopped it in half. Its hind legs, disconnected, were twitching. The pink guts fell on the floor in this tangle, jiggling. All the monks just stared, stunned. One of them ran out and threw up in the snow. What were these stupid monks arguing about? Was it who should feed the cat, or does a cat belong in a Zen monastery? In a commentary, Tenkei said they were arguing about whether the cat had Buddha nature or not. So if that's what they were arguing about, Master Nansen's teaching cut through this debate. No Buddha nature, no not Buddha nature, no cat. Or as Dogen said, Nansen didn't cut through the cat, he cut through Buddha. I hope these stupid monks learned their lesson. It was an expensive one. The cat hadn't agreed to give up its life to be an example in a philosophy lesson. Maybe it stuck into the monastery because it smelled the mice who were living in the walls, trying to stay warm, eating the barley from the temple stores. At first, this stray cat was skittish, but over time it learned to trust the monks. You know, maybe they fed it, they gave it some water, and now this happens. It's cut in half, murdered by Nansen. There is a 15th century Japanese painting of Nansen. There he is, he's holding a cat and he's got a really nice sword. But what's a monk doing with a nice sword like that? I think he used a kitchen knife. So did Nansen actually do this or not? Maybe he just pantomimed it, you know, like we do sometimes in Dharma talks or koan practice, right? Like we go like, shh, but he didn't actually do it, right? I've definitely read some essays on this koan that say that this ancestor that we revere, he couldn't possibly have broken the precept like this. He wouldn't actually murder a cat just to teach some students a lesson. If we dive into the layers of commentary for a minute, there's a lot of it. Wan Song wrote 250 years after the incident. He wrote, "Eminent Shin of the Liao dynasty criticized Nansen's group for killing a living being, committing wrongdoing. Head monk Wen, on the other hand, helped Nansen out, saying, 'An ancient text has it that he just made the gesture of cutting. How could he have simply cut it into two pieces in one stroke, sending fresh blood gushing?' In these two critiques of the ancestor, Mr. Wen's fault is the graver, Mr. Shin's fault is the lesser." So in other words, Wen Song is saying, go ahead and say it was wrong to kill the cat, but don't say that he only pretended to do it. And the modern teacher, Gary Shishin Wick, agrees. He says, "Contrary to the opinions of some modern Zen teachers, that knife did cut the fur, the skin, the muscle, and the viscera." Who cares? Why are these people arguing about, did Nansen really kill the cat? This is about the stakes of our practice. We spend thousands of hours staring at the floor, and we should be asking, what are we accomplishing here? Are we or are we not training ourselves to respond when life and death are on the line? So I've been rock climbing for a few years now, and I do it in a style called trad or traditional climbing or traditional lead climbing, and it's fairly dangerous. Trad climbing involves constant risk assessment and managing of my own fear while I'm climbing. I'm going to try to explain how trad climbing works, and I brought visual aids and props. So when I climb, I wear a harness and I'm tied in to a rope. So if I fall, the rope will comfortably catch me. And then my climbing partner, my belayer, has the rope attached to their harness and going through a belay device. So as I climb up and away from my belayer, they can give out slack. But then if I fall and the rope comes tight, kind of like a car seat belt, it stops me from falling. But with lead climbing, I start next to my belayer. So obviously, there's nothing the belayer can do for the first 10 or 15 feet because I'm above them. And I'm completely unprotected. If I fall, I hit the ground. I'm free soloing. So with trad climbing, you really don't want to fall for the first 10 or so feet of the climb. At some point, as soon as I can, I find a crack in the rock and I find an appropriate cam from my harness. So I'm carrying about a dozen of these and they're of different sizes. So I select the one that fits the crack and it sort of works like a harpoon. You retract the lobes, you stick it into the crack, and then it holds quite hard. I clip my rope into it, and now I'll keep climbing above it, but if I fall, I'll fall a limited amount. Maybe if I'm 5 feet above the last piece that I placed, I'll fall 10 feet, or probably actually quite a bit more because there's always slack in the rope. The rope is stretchy and elastic. And so if I'm like 5 feet above my piece, I'm probably looking at a 15-foot fall. Assuming I complete the climb, then I can come down and this is called clean climbing. I can take all of my cams back up by just retracting the lobes and taking it back out of the crack. The dangers with trad climbing, and it is dangerous, are you go up through a blank section of rock where there isn't a crack that you can stick your cam into, or you have this like funny shaped crack and you think you've placed the cam correctly, but actually it's wiggled out, or it's not that strong, or the rock itself is weak. And I fall, and I think the cam's going to catch me, but actually it pops out, and so I fall much, much farther than I expected. That has not happened to me yet, but it happens to climbers all the time, and it's a really common way to get injured. So that's my main fear when I'm climbing. So a little bit more just to show you how the whole system works when I was actually doing it. All right, so here I am on a pretty chill 5/8 climb. I've got one cam in already. My belayer's down below me and I'm doing a move. Sweet, look at me go. And then once I've gotten into a stable position, I'm immediately looking at the crack in front of me and thinking, okay, what size is that? Do I have that cam on my harness? Yes, I do. Gonna stick it into the rock. clip my rope to it. Now I'm safe for a few more feet of climbing, so off I go. Here I wasn't scared at all. This was a pretty easy climb. So being afraid of falling and injury while I'm climbing, it's this really fascinating state of mind. In regular life, I'm not afraid of being hurt very often. Like the most dangerous things I do besides climbing are I bike in New York City or I drive, but I'm so accustomed to those that I'm hardly ever afraid. And then besides, climbing is special. We like to say that it's the slowest dangerous sport. You can be in danger, clinging to a wall far above your last piece of protection, afraid for a long time, trying to figure out what to do next. And when I'm afraid, I can watch what my mind does. It tends to get distracted with imagining how I'm going to fall or regretting having started this climb or feeling hopeless. And then I can practice trying to refocus my attention on actually solving the problem. Like, what is the next thing I need to do? How do I minimize the risk? How do I finish this climb? And that's the Zen of climbing for me, is observing how fear works and learning how to redirect my attention to the actual climbing. There's a handful of techniques. You can probably guess some of them. Focus on the breathing. Breathe deep and loud and slow. My climbing mentor, when he observes that I'm afraid, he says, I want to hear you breathing from 30 feet away. You can focus on the senses. You can feel your fingertips and your toes through the shoes on the rock. You can look down. It's actually very helpful. Don't look down is terrible advice. You can look down. You can look all around. You can hear the birds. These days, also, all of the climbing coaches are saying that you should practice meditation. So I use my 20 years of meditation, all of those tools and muscle that I've developed for focusing my attention, and I use it to deal with my fear and to execute these tactics. But in addition to just having sat a lot of zazen, I also need specific tools that are either specific to climbing or specific to managing fear. Last month, I was trying one of the most challenging routes that I've ever climbed. And my mentor, Dustin, was belaying me and coaching and encouraging me from the base. And right off the bat, two things happened that rattled me. First, when I was starting off on that climb, those 10 feet where there's no protection, my hand slipped. And I didn't fall, but I got super shaken. And I climbed back all the way down to the ground, and I stood there for a few minutes breathing and like gathering my wits again. I climbed up and I got through that section. And then I got to what I expected was the hardest part, the crux. And Dustin took a video of me, so I can show you that. Okay, so you can see I've placed some pieces. And all right, so I get here and I think getting around this corner is got to be the hardest part of this climb. So I clip a piece, I grunt, I move around, oh, thank God. And I stick in another piece and I'm happy. And I shake out the tension in my forearm muscles so I can get some blood moving in there again and recover some strength. And I think, I'm doing this climb. I'm so happy. I'm going to get to the top. It's got to be cruising from here. That was the hardest part. So shake out a little bit, place some more pieces, and I go up. And I'm looking around, and I think, actually, that next move looks super hard. I've got to stand on this tiny little, like, pebble-sized foothold and then lunge to my left and grab a hold. And it's going to be total commitment. If I don't grab it, I know that I will fall. So I look down, I come back down, I shake out a little bit, I'd get some more chalk on my hands to absorb the sweat. I come back down. I think I reinforced some of my protection down here because this was the last good crack, and it's like 10 feet below that next crux. Go back up. All right, come on, Jesse. And I think, is this, nope, I couldn't commit. And I came back down to my ledge again. And it was such a almost surreal experience to be like simultaneously two minds in one body. One mind thought, this is a safe fall. I'm not going to hit a ledge. I'm far above the ground. I've got good pieces. I want to finish this climb clean, without any falls, without having my belayer take the rope tight. I want to do it. I'm going to be really proud of myself when I finish it. This was my goal when I started. I just got to make that move. And then the second I started to go for it, my body would say, nope, it's too dangerous. My body didn't have a plan B. My body just said no. So I come back down to my ledge. This is my third time here. And you can see me, I'm looking down at Dustin. I'm saying, take the rope tight. I need to just hang here off of my cams. And maybe I'll calm down enough to commit to that move. And Dustin says, okay, I can do that. But do you want to try it just one more time? Because you haven't fallen yet. You haven't hung on the rope yet. If you finish this climb, you can claim a clean ascent of it, and that'll be that was your goal, and that'll be a big moment for you. So do you want to try one more time? And because Dustin's my mentor, we've known each other for years. I've given him permission to push me this way. I said, okay. Take some deep breaths, psych myself up, and I went for it, and I got to the top of the climb. And what I love about climbing is like how visible it is, how visible the working of my mind is. I knew what it was that had rattled me. You know, it was that slip early on, and it was also the surprise of the second crux after I thought I'd finished the first, the crux. And I knew what I had to do. I had to lunge for that hold. And I could also just observe my body being unwilling to do it, or a part of my mind being unwilling to do it. That's what makes climbing such a great kind of X-ray of my mind's operation. Is it's all laid out there undeniably. But in the rest of my life, there's so much cloudiness. Like, how else am I hesitating right now? What is it that I'm putting off? What is it that I should say or I should do that I'm not quite willing to? I can fool myself about these things. There are things that I'm so afraid of that I won't even admit that they exist in my life. And so I just ignore them, months, years go by when I don't take that step, like just hanging out on my ledge. And maybe you should ask yourself this, like, is there something you should do that you're hesitating about? Do you know what it is, but you're hesitating? Are you unwilling even to admit that this task is out there for you? Are you trying to ignore it? Sometimes the crux in our life is really visible, like Nansen comes at us with a cleaver. He says, say a word. Sometimes it's easier to ignore. But either way, if we're standing there frozen and mute, like Nansen's monks, the cat dies. And it's in these moments that a mentor or a teacher is so helpful. Like Dustin shouting up at me. The last time that I hesitated, he shouted up, pick up the tempo. And that little bit of encouragement, like, don't hesitate again, just keep moving. That was what I needed on my third attempt to get through that move. And in a lot of times in my life, there's been some crux. And I went into Dokusan and I talked to a teacher, and they didn't tell me what to do, but they gave me the encouragement to do what I already knew had to be done. So what's your crux right now? What can a Zen teacher help you unfreeze yourself so that you can do it? When Nansen cut the cat in two, his wisest student, Zhou Shu, was out traveling, but he came back home that afternoon to the monastery. He shook off his heavy quilted coat, got all of the snow out of it at the monastery door. He kicked off his heavy shoes and changed into his straw sandals and went into Nansen. And Nansen told him what had happened in the kitchen that morning. And Zhou Shu didn't say a word. He took off his sandals, he put them on top of his head, turned around and walked out. Nansen called after him, "If you'd been there, you could have saved the cat." It's a weird, what does it mean? It's a weird gesture. People have been arguing about it for 1200 years, I think. And I think it's just the original symbolism is probably lost. Maybe at the time people were buried barefoot and their sandals were placed at their heads in the grave. Maybe people at funerals wore their sandals on their heads, or maybe that's a garbled version of the first interpretation. But we don't really have to know exactly what this meant in ancient China. The point is that Zhou Shu responded. He had a word. He made this gesture. Maybe the meaning of his gesture is acknowledging death, like, yes, dead cat, or no cat. Maybe it means something else and we don't know what it is, but he would have saved the cat just by responding without freezing. It would have been enough. The worst climbing accident that I've ever seen was a couple of months ago. I had started leading up an easy climb with a friend belaying me, and I was about 25 feet off the ground when I heard behind me the unmistakable sound of a climber falling. It's like the jingling of all of his gear and then the thump of the 150-pound body hitting rock. And I heard it was a popular area. There were a few other climbing teams within eyesight or within earshot, and I heard one person scream and I heard one person yell, "Call 911." So I knew what had happened, but I decided not to look because I was still in danger. I was still 25 feet up a vertical wall. And so the first thing I did was I looked down and determined that, yes, the terrain is easy. I can climb down. So I did that. I pulled my protection out of the wall as I went, got back down to the ground, and then I looked over. And about 50 feet away from me and 15 feet off the ground, there was a ledge and there was an unconscious climber lying on it. So by the time I looked over, another climber had already climbed up to the fallen climber and was checked his pulse. He was still alive. Tried to get him to talk. He was still unconscious. And what I learned later was this climber, Morgan, had started up a fairly difficult route. And he had done exactly what I am afraid of, which is that he placed several pieces that were inadequate. They weren't the right size for the cracks. And so he fell, slipped, his foot popped, but then at least two cams beneath him popped out of the rock and didn't hold his fall. So he fell basically from the top to the bottom of the climb, about 50 feet. And he hit his head once on the ledge, and that broke his helmet off, and then he hit his bare head on a different ledge, and then he finally came to rest 15 feet off the ground. So I untied from my rope and coiled it and got all of my gear out of the way so that rescuers would be able to access the base of the cliff. And within minutes, rangers had arrived. And this slim young guy was leading the rescue, he just kind of like bounded up to the base of the cliff. And he had this kind of like calm, friendly, almost cheerful attitude, like, this is my job and I've got the skills and now I can apply them. Just like Joshu, just no hesitation. So Joshu asks around. There's like a dozen climbers gathered at the base now. Everybody who heard it had gotten themselves safe and then come to the base to see how they could help. Joshu asks around, what happened? He fell. What's his name? Morgan. There's all of these ropes on the wall. What is everything attached to? What can I use to get him off this ledge? Pretty quickly, Joshu has organized us into 3 teams. He's got 3 belayers at the bottom. He's attached to one rope, another climber's to another rope. The Morgan is attached to a third. They use these 3 ropes to lower Morgan down. Some other rangers have run up with the stretcher. They lower Morgan directly into the stretcher. Morgan is semi-conscious now. Joshu introduces himself. Hi, you've had an accident. Do you know where you are? And he doesn't say, I'm so sorry this has happened to you. He's not saying, oh my God, look at all this blood. He's just, calmly dealing with the situation, which is what I would want in Morgan's situation. So once Morgan was in a stretcher on the ground, we had to get him downhill to the road where the ranger truck was waiting for him. And I was hanging out. I was super curious. How's this going to go? And Morgan said, okay, Joshu said, we're going to do the caterpillar thing. Like everybody knows what the caterpillar thing is. And it turns out when it's steep, rocky, slippery terrain like it was there, you don't want to walk downhill carrying somebody in a stretcher. You might drop them. You might slip. So Joshu organized us so that 2 groups lined up on either side of the stretcher, picked up Morgan, 2 more groups lined up downhill, and we passed the stretcher downhill. And then this is the caterpillar bit. The uphill people ran around the backs of the downside people, made 2 more lines further downhill, and then received the stretcher again. So sort of leapfrogging in reverse downhill, passing Morgan hand over hand until we got to the truck. And every time I passed the stretcher down past me, I kind of looked down into Morgan's face to see how he was doing. He was going in and out of consciousness. He was talking a little bit, looked like his nose was broken. He had a lot of blood. He was alive. He was breathing. And none of this upset me at all. I wasn't surprised that there was an injured climber. I wasn't surprised that a climber had been injured in this way. In fact, I was kind of having fun, like with all of my friends scrambling around on this hillside, solving this problem together. And there's kind of a coldness about me that I've known about myself for a long time and kind of disliked. And I was aware of it then. And after this experience, I've come to accept this about me. No, I'm not sympathetic to strangers. No, I don't cry at movies, but I am helpful, and I'm good in an emergency, and I'm more confident about that now than I was. So in contrast to me and Joshu and the other climbers, there was this one girl at the cliff face who just fell apart. There was this whole group that included her and Morgan, a bunch of other like 20-something people who had come up from the city for the day, and hadn't climbed outside very much. And I think that this girl just was shocked that something like this could happen on an outdoor trip. I wasn't shocked at all, but for her, and maybe she was really close to Morgan too, this just broke her. She was crying so hard she couldn't see the ground in front of her. She needed two of her friends to hold her by the elbows, guide her to a flat bit of ground out of the way, and then sat with her, holding her on either side while she cried for the entire 20 or 30 minutes that it took us to rescue Morgan and get him in the truck. I'm not going to judge that. I don't know what her experience has been like. I don't know what her relationship with Morgan was like. If a climber that I was close to was hurt, I know I wouldn't be as calm as I was. But the fact is, she wasn't saving the cat. So I don't really know what happened to Morgan. We got him in the truck. The truck took him to a helicopter, which took him to a hospital. I have heard that he was still conscious and speaking at the hospital, so I'm going to assume that he was okay. I'm going to keep climbing for many years, and I will see more accidents like this. So I'm this fall taking wilderness first aid and a few other classes so I can be more helpful in these situations. And if somebody that I know gets hurt, I won't be this calm, but I think that I can hold it together. When you read about Zen, it's easy to misunderstand the message about Zen training that these texts are giving us. We can think that Zen practice has no goal or no purpose. Like the Heart Sutra says, no path, no wisdom, no gain. Wei Neng said, there's no mirror to polish and no dust to fall on the mirror. Dogen says, we're not meditating to get enlightened. We are already enlightened. That's why we practice. But that doesn't mean that practice has no purpose or that it has no effect. It has an effect. You know that already. It has an effect now. And over the decades of your practice, it will have a transformative effect on you. So it's crucial to ask yourself, how are you training yourself? How are you changing? How is what you are doing now going to affect who you are in the future? Because Nansen's going to come at you with his cleaver. You'll only have a moment to respond. Are you going to freeze or are you going to save the cat? Good luck out there.